This is our lesson recap for 10-1, two nations. And when we say two nations, we're referring to the North and the South in the years before the Civil War, say 1840s, 1850s. So, conflict over slavery. Essentially, the North and South have the biggest distinction between the two, while there are a few. The biggest distinction by far is slavery. Northerners in the 1850s thought slavery violated basically the principles of the United States and the Christian religion. Now, opponents basically were members of democratic Protestant faiths. Slavery's white opponents did not necessarily believe in equality among the races. They had what's called prejudice. Prejudice, unfavorable opinion of another group, important vocabulary word. Understand that most African Americans in America at this time were slaves. There were very, very few statistically free African Americans in the North. Most Northerners had bigoted views towards them and towards all African Americans. Prejudice was not a Southern thing. Racism was not a Southern thing. They were American things at this time. And then we get to Uncle Tom's Cabin. And this is something that starts to change hearts and minds. Written by Harriet Beecher Stowe. She is a Northerner who happens to venture across the Ohio River into Kentucky and sees a slave auction, and she is just horrified. It's set in the pre-Civil War South. This here is an image from it where essentially Simon Legree is this awful slave master, and this is essentially Uncle Tom, and he's ministered to by another slave after he's whipped. Very, very horrible stuff. 12 Years a Slave would be a modern equivalent today, a movie that put it basically put the awful details of slavery into into sharp relief. Okay, we'll keep going here. Southern views on slavery. They felt that Uncle Tom's Cabin, and there's a mistake right there. It should say Uncle Tom's Cabin. I'll fix that for the lecture today. Was insulting and full of lies. And they talked about how in the Industrial Revolution, factory workers in the North were treated terribly. And they basically said, this is very hypocritical. You're criticizing our treatment of slaves. So North and South, we talk about differences. So the North is growing more urban. 9 out of the 10 largest cities were in the South. The South did have some cities like Charleston, Savannah, Jackson, Mississippi, Richmond, but really the big cities were in the North. That there's a little city called a little island called Manhattan in the city of New York. The South is becoming more agricultural, plantations. Although most slave owners only had about 5 or fewer slaves, still basically the rural farming slave labor lifestyle. Other differences between North and South. The North had twice the population of the South. It had more communications and telegraph. And then basically the last slide we're going to leave today, railroads. 70% of railroad track in America was in the North, as this map illustrates. Not all, but 70% of it was in the North. So very, very differing cultures, as you can see.